Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. We thank you for your time and your participation. Today, we are starting a beautiful course on Khutbah presentation or Islamic Talk presentation. This course is entitled Khutbah Kitchen. This is just one person's thoughts on the best ingredients to make a khutbah that appeals to all and is tasty to all. I think the best cookbook is one that incorporates your own personality, your own style, and still communicates effectively the message that you want to present. That's why this is the Cookbook Kitchen. If you see, and as we go through this presentation, you will see the kind of nerdy um, uniqueness that is me. Some people might think it's corny, but if you're listening to a cookbook or a presentation from me and you know me at all, you will know it's very authentic. You will know, you will see me represented in the words that I say. And that's the best way for you to communicate effectively with your audience. That when Aisha radiallahu anha was asked what was the character of the prophet, what was the prophet like? She said he was the Quran walking, that he was exemplified in his actions, in the way that he walked, in the way that he talked, in the way that he listened to other people, in the way that he shared all of the good things that he had learned from Prophet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealing the Quran to him, that he was a living example of the Quran walking. And so the first point for a good khutbah is make sure that you put something that really resonates with you in it. I think that and that goes with any Islamic talk. I can say that the first time that I was my journey to giving the cookbahs was a little strange. I was a project manager, and that's my field professionally. I'm a project manager building natural gas pipelines and infrastructure, and Hurricane Ike had come and destroyed the masjid, or rendered the roof to the point where it was better to rebuild from the ground up than it was to try to repair the roof. And so Imam Wazir Ali, resident Imam of Masjid Waqfi Muhammad and Mercy Community Center, approached me, and he knew that I was a project manager, and he wanted me to come and help project manage the building of Masjid Waqfi Muhammad. And I kind of reached out to him. I was like, hey, yo, I'm a project manager. I build pipelines. I don't build houses. I don't build buildings. And he's like, the same skills that you have in that, you can use in this. And that was his hook. That was the way he got me to start really working with Bashir Waqfi Muhammad and the community. And once he got his hooks into me, one day he said, hey, I can't make Juma. Can you give a cookbook? And I'm like, yo, I'm a project manager, not an imam. This is not the same skill set. But I did it. And I just and I've been doing it ever since. I am still pretty much always nervous when I give a cookbook because I understand the weight and the responsibility. But one of the hadiths that I really resonate with is one on leadership. And there's this hadith in leadership, and it's in my presentation, but I'll just jump to it here now. It's essentially says that if one should never seek leadership, but if someone seeks leadership, they only have their own resources. But if leadership is thrust upon them, they are nominated, they're called to leadership, then they get their own resources plus the help of Allah. So even when I get called at 5 minutes before 1:30 to give a khutbah, I have that sense of inner peace that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help me. Because I'm not seeking this position of leadership, is one that's being thrust upon me. And so I get the additional help and support. And I found that some of the best khutbahs that I've ever given were ones that I was unprepared to give until maybe 5 minutes before. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just allows that the inspiration to flow through you so that you can communicate effectively. All right. So now I am going to I had this whole presentation worked out, but we, in the efforts of time, I think we're going to jump just to the what I would call the cooking aspect of this. So the basics of the cookball is a traditional opening. You have your, and you can see my slides still haven't been finalized yet, so I'm still working through that. You have the first part where you glorify Allah, and glorify some aspect of taqwa or iman. You kind of discuss how it is. This is, and then the second part is where you relate that same topic, glorifying Allah, the discussion of taqwa or iman, to the community and how they can have a communal appeal. And then you have your closing, which is typically du'as, and they can be du'as that reinforce what you've said before. And just in a real world, any announcements that you need to work in as well. So the way I typically work my khutbahs is state the topic. At the beginning of the khutbah, I try to let people know what I'm going to talk about. Understanding what the topic is helps the audience look for meaning. So they can, you give them a goal. And so even if you're just dropping hints, where they say a hint to the wise is sufficient, as you're dropping these hints, they're looking for them. They come to look for those hints because you gave them what the topic was. That, hey, you're talking on Surah also, or hey, you're talking on how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us to spend our time wisely, or not backbite, or whatever our topic is. You let the people know what you're going to talk about. I have found that one of the really important ways for you to communicate is to have a hook. You can have an acronym. Let's see. One of the acronyms I remember someone used in the relative past was HEART, I think it was. I think it holds every. I can't remember it right now, but using an acronym, some kind of 5-point plan or word or phrase, something that helps people to remember what the point of your topic is. If you're using sort of author, for example, that you have hey, here are the 4 points that you need to do. You have to have iman. You have to have your salihati, your righteous deeds. You have to join together in the mutual teaching of the truth, and you have to join together in the mutual teaching of patience and constancy. So it's iman, salihati, haq, and sabr. And you give that, you reiterate it at the beginning and reiterate it at the end. It helps the people to really focus on what you're talking about, and then they start looking for what's coming next. You use a story. I think Imam Wazir is really good about this in the way that he formulates his khutbahs. He comes with either from the tafsir of Prophet Muhammad, life example of Prophet Muhammad, or even one from his own life or his own dealings in the community. And he uses that story. And in the midst of bringing that story, you use your Quranic support, and you exemplify how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the same way he uses the allegory. You exemplify that in the way that you're giving the speech. So you use your Quranic support, or you use a tafsir from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the tafsir almost always lends itself to you being able to find an ayat to use as your support, or a hadith to use as your support. And then you go ahead and tell that story. People love storytelling. Storytelling is an art, but it's also a great way for you to communicate. Throughout the Quran, we get all of these excellent stories that contain within them a moral message for us to pick through. And so you take, no more than 3 to 5 ayats from the Quran that tells the story, and you break down some of the life lessons that you get from each of those stories. But you have to paint the picture first. You have to set the scene. And then finally, in your conclusion, you give them homework. You leave them with the takeaway. If you don't hear anything else from my khutbah, I want to make sure that you know X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to kind of take a pause here and see if there are any thoughts, any questions, any reflections on what I've said, anything you guys want me to go deeper on. Open it up.
I really like the third point there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses stories himself and allegories, like you said.
Hmm.
I think that's very important, and it helps people really remember the point, right? MashaAllah.
Alhamdulillah. Uh,
So I have a question.
yes.
So you said in the beginning, like you don't seek leadership. When leadership is thrust upon you, you have the help of Allah in addition to your, what other resources Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is already giving you.
Hmm.
So what's the point in preparing in advance? If you know what I mean? Like, okay, or like now that you are considered, like, an imam, where you would be called upon to, you know, or that you might have that as your um, role now. Like, what's the point in preparing, or what does preparation look like? Um, given that, like, do we not still have the help of Allah in that process? I don't know if my question is making sense, but
Yes, it does.
okay.
So, alhamdulillah, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, said that whenever a Muslim endeavors to do something, he should seek to perfect it. So, even if you are, in a situation where you're always being called, you also want to be in a situation where if you know you're going to be called, you're going to be prepared. Because if that's something that's being asked of you, you should again seek to perfect what's being asked of you. So you should seek to perfect. You shouldn't. Imam Wazir taught us in our leadership training class we should always have a khutbah in our back pocket. We should always be ready. So even because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uh, gives us several stories in the Quran that shows that uh, how's it? I think it's a phrase that he doesn't just call the qualified; he qualifies the call. Um, so, like when we look at the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, Prophet Musa alayhi salam had to go through all of these tests and trials, and we see, the ups and downs that he went in his life, where from being abandoned as left on the river as a baby to being reunited with his mother, from having uh, being of those who were about to be killed to being raised in the house of Pharaoh, from the house of Pharaoh and being well off and to again killing someone and being left with nothing, and to the point where he was praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for any good deed, any good that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave. And then he had to give his life in service, or was given the opportunity to give his life in service for several years working so that he can have a marriage, so he had a family. And then to be called to prophethood when he felt like he had a knot around his tongue, where he felt like he couldn't communicate effectively. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he made this dua that, reads the knot from my tongue, so that I can speak clearly and support me with my brother who has basically the gift of gab, who has this ability to speak. But for the rest of the story, we hear very little from Harun. And we feel very little from Aaron in terms of how he, as a prophet, is reaching the people. We hear a lot about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses Musa to still have to talk to Pharaoh, to still command the children of Israel, to still do all of this talk. So even though Musa didn't necessarily feel qualified, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed him in an environment and put him through all these tests and trials to prepare him so that he would be ready. And that's kind of the same situation that we find ourselves in when we are called to leadership, that uh, typically people have seen something in us that leads them to believe that we'd be good at this, even if we don't see it ourselves. But if they see it, then we still have an obligation to hone it, to perfect it, to be better at it, so that we can discharge this awesome duty and responsibility that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. That can answer your question.
Yes, alhamdulillah.
All right. Let's see, what else do I have in my presentation? Um, but I like so how to find some of these things too. I think it's I think each of us has our own way of coming up with a topic. Um, and our topic, and again, I'll just the kind of meat and potatoes, the same way that you would um, see if I can. I don't know if I can share my screen on this. Let's see if I can switch it. Give me 1 second, folks. Present. Stop screen. Present. Share. Yeah. So we come up with whatever our brainstorm is, our main idea. And I think from that main idea, whatever it is, a topic. So either of you, give me a topic. What do you want to talk about in this community, the cookbook, or just give me a topic.
Um, how about like being true to your word?
All right. So being true to your word. If that's your main topic, that's the thing you want to present. Then you need to find, for me anyway, the way I would do it for part, you need to find Quranic support. I would find a hadith or a life example from the prophet that supports what you're saying, and then a way for you to apply it and either relate both of those, or then thirdly, find a way to apply it to your real life. So being true to your word. From another way that you another thing that's vitally important for you in terms of preparing cookball is listen to other people give cookballs. I've gotten so much, so many of my cookballs are me paraphrasing or rewording a cookbook that I heard from Yasser Kazi or um, uh, Omar Suleiman or some other imam, or even the other imams that I have to listen to. It's just I can take my own spin on it or use some of their support, but the way I say it and communicate it is going to sound different than the way they said it and communicated. So be constantly listening. So anybody have any idea of some Quranic passages that support being true to your word?
Yeah, there's a verse in, I think, Surah Al-Hujurat, or one of these surah. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لم تقولون ما لا تفعلون.
Yes, that's exactly the same one I was thinking of.
Okay, mashallah.
So why do you, oh, you who believe, why do you say that which you do not do? One of the most hateful things to Allah is that which you, when you say that which you do not do. Right? So you can make your whole cookbook about those two lines. I would look up the tafsir on that. So what was happening in Prophet Muhammad's life when he revealed these particular ayats? Let that be the story that you start off with to reveal, to lead into this important point. Whether you're looking at Ibn Kathir or Maududi, there are lots of online resources that will give you the time and place and some additional hadith, or let you know what was going on during that time period when these ayats were revealed. And that ends up giving us a wealth of knowledge to pull from. And if you can't find, a really story that kind of resonates with you on that, then find some hadiths, being true to your word, hadiths that hadith support about speaking, anything talking about the tongue, and how beneficial or problematic the use of the tongue can be. Um, you know, anything around that. So that's your hadith support. And then how do you play that out in real life? What happens when somebody's not true to the word? You know, for me, I would look at, George Santos. He is a politician right now. You don't have to call him out by name, but you can say, there's a politician right now who has just been elected to office and has been proven to not be true to his word. What will happen to him? What happened to previous companions in the story of Prophet Muhammad, or people who were alive during Prophet Muhammad's time, who weren't true to their word? What was the end result for them? Or even if you don't know any of that, what's the end result that these people feel like they got to wait for it here, but definitely they'll be held accountable for it in the next life, and we don't want to be held accountable. We don't want that to be marked on our scale of bad deeds, that we have to answer for on the day of Yom Kippur. So, that ends up being your topic. It's about being word, being true, how important speaking properly is. You can even, another Quranic support would be, yeah, you have Ladina Amino. Call and Sadida. I can't remember the whole idea, but say a word directed to the right, and then what? If you do that with taqwa on your mind, that Allah will amend for you your sins and forgive your deeds and raise high the esteem you held. And whoever obeys Allah's measure is attained the Fawzan Azim, the supreme achievement. That if you being true to your word and trying to say the right thing, even if you don't know how to say the right thing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you're trying to say the right thing with Allah on your mind, He will do all of these things just for you trying to say the right thing. So be true to your word, and that's the way you form that. And then you would have to, in the second part, look at that from a communal standpoint. We need leaders who are true to their word. We need people who, if you give your bayar, your leadership, you elect someone, we need you to hold them accountable. You can expound on that, but you make a communal discussion around being true as well, and what that obligates you to. That makes sense.
Yeah, mashallah. That's excellent.
Okay. So looking at cookbook content, and I make it a little easier for everybody to read, hopefully. And so, ISGH has and this is from the ISGH website, that a cookbook must not discuss opinions related to U.S. government policies, local political issues, or support or oppose any political opponent. You can talk about politics without supporting or opposing a political candidate. You can talk about their actions in the same way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can does quite often in the Quran. He talks about the actions of people that, without naming names. There are very few people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions by name in the Quran. There are lots of actions of people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He loves or dislikes or does not love. So you can have these conversations, because I feel like personally that these conversations are very relevant. Local political issues affect us on a daily basis. They are part of our lives, and we're part of the political process. But I do understand that, you can't come out and start naming names and opposing individuals from the rostrum, because then it seems to obligate or indict the whole organization. That's why even churches, and when we bring them out to Eid events, they typically invite both sides. It's not that we don't invite political candidates to come talk to us. They just don't invite just one party. They make it both parties. Yeah. So you can talk about humanitarian or foreign countries and the issues that they have, but the focus on the humanitarian or the moral concern. I would agree with that as well. All right. Because I do want to, we're probably 30 minutes into it. Muhammad, do you have any, was there something more in terms of like how you formulate a cookbook, like how to find information, anything else around that you were looking for?
No, mashallah, I think you covered that part very well. I think when you scroll down just now, I saw something that's interesting. Like, this is kind of what we were talking about earlier a little bit, right?
Yes.
This is very interesting here too.
All right. So again, I think with again, one of the excellent spices that make a cookbook great is knowing your audience. You want to tailor your cookbook, your presentation, your talk for the audience that you're going to. I find it vitally important. I guess for me personally, if I'm giving a cookbook at Masjid Wartadi Muhammad, it may be very different than a cookbook I give at an ISGH masjid. Because I know at Masjid Wartadi Muhammad that the audience is looking for and is used to us talking about relevant events that affect them from a communal perspective, and they have challenges that they're looking for answers for, for help for that affect their particular situations and circumstances. Here in Houston, for the most part, almost every masajid has a unique character associated with it. Rightly or wrongly, we even identify certain masjids by the country of origin of the individuals who attend, not necessarily the name of the masjid or even its location. Sometimes it is the country of origin of the majority of the participants. And so knowing that helps you to tailor your cookbook to make sure that it is going to fall on the right ears. And even beyond that, knowing that a congregation is more youth oriented than a elder oriented also ends up helping you to understand what it is you need to be talking about, because the references you use, the examples you use should be tailored to the audience that you're talking to. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, when he would send a congregation out to spread Islam or to go to a different country, he always sent a member, if he had the ability to, he sent someone as the head of that delegation who was familiar with that group or of those people. And so we have to be sensitive and do the same thing. That's a part of understanding, picking the right people for the right job. Is also, I guess, also falls on us as leaders to pick the right examples for the right audience. Because I can use an example from contemporary American experience at Master Worth of WDM, whereas that I would probably, whereas it would be understood. I wouldn't have to give all the backstory about, explaining some one-off thing from the Cosby Show or something else that is kind of immersed in American mythology and American understanding. But if I wanted to use a similar example at ISGH Masjid that is not mostly American attendees, then I want to come from the tafsir of Prophet Muhammad. I want to come from a different example. I might be using the same thing or, talking about the same thing, but the relevance and the understanding, the cultural context will be different and I want to respect the cultural context for the place that I'm in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, think about the goal of your story. Again, I think it's really vitally important. I think Productive Muslim has is one of the places I go for um, my takeaways. And all right, here is important points, things that I can do. I think it's a great website. They have a whole list of blogs that they've done on different topics, and they are very good about giving you like a 1 through 8 things you can do based on, to improve your iman or your taqwa based on that topic. So it's a wealth of information, but you got to think about the goal. So any story you share is either to wake them up, is to drive home the point or the message, is to make them, and the goal is to make them feel a certain way so that they can take ownership and responsibility and learn something or be reminded of something that they can be using next week or the next day or as soon as they leave the khutbah or as soon as they leave your environment. You want to give them something that either reminds them or refreshes them so that they can put it to use. You don't want to just share for the sharing's sake. Choosing the right time and the right place. This is especially true when you are using current events. I'm trying to. All right, I'm reading what's here on the screen, and I'm trying to come up with a different example. See, a funny example is during Ramadan, you might not want to use an example that's talking about the feasting. It's just probably not the right time for you to talk about, how good the food was, or using food as an analogy for what it is that you're trying to, communicate. So you want to make sure you get the right time in the right place. And you have to have some emotional intelligence. You have to read your audience. One of the things about our audience from an Islamic Talk perspective is that, to put it kindly, they have stopped all business, trade, and traffic, and they are coming to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they are not always hungry for knowledge at that point in time. They are there, they are being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but that does not mean that they are ready to listen and be listen. So quite often, whether they be in the first row or the third row or the last row, they may be falling asleep. They may be looking at their watch. They may be giving you all these types of cues that they are ready to be someplace else. They are ready to pick back up on whatever it is they had to leave off while they're there. So you got to pay attention to that. That's a great time. Remember, Wazir is really good at modulating his voice. He starts off at a reasonable tone and then he gets louder at some points. It's a great way to wake people up or to hit something or to emphasize your point, to strike while the iron's hot. These are really good physical tools to get people's attention, and also know that those things are going to happen, that somebody's going to be looking at their watch, somebody's going to be trying to sleep. You can do some aspect of your you do some aspect of your khutbah to kind of retain their attention, but you shouldn't always be trying to reach those people who seem like they're not paying attention. You do a little bit that you can. Once you feel like you've done that, you kind of allow that not to hold your attention or to be the thing that that you walk away with after your khutbah, because those things happen. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Right? You can try to do your best job to make it entertaining, and engaging, but you don't hit. Not every joke is going to fall on everybody. Not every story is going to resonate with everybody, and that's not your responsibility. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is reminded over and over again that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't send him as a to us to manage our affairs. He just sent him to us as a reminder. So remind the people, and perchance they'll pay attention. Perchance they'll listen. So use a hook to get your audience's attention. That's again, it can be the story. It can be your 5 talking points. It can be like Surah Ar-Rahman, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? You having a frame that, hey, you just brought up this excellent point and hit them with the hook again. And, that's the way people remember hooks on songs. It's a very effective mnemonic to help people remember. So, which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? Or I had a khutbah where I was talking, the best dress is taqwa. And dress was, in dressing, that description is also not just talking about your physical dress, but your character, the way you carry yourself, the way you walk in the world. So, I would continually ask people after I make a point, what are you wearing? What is it that people see when they see you? What are you wearing? And just kept hitting with trying to drive home the point. So having that hook, because people, if they don't remember anything else, he kept saying, what are you wearing? So that's what he was talking about. He was talking about, taqwa. He was talking, he might have been talking about 1,000 other points, but I remember that because he kept saying it. So, using a hook. You have to be careful with a hook, as sometimes people tell me I might repeat things, too much. But, if you're using it purposefully, then I think there's an excellent storytelling technique. Even in, I'm trying to think of good fiction and storytelling. And the raven said nevermore, in the Tour of the Raven. I remember that the raven said nevermore. I don't remember all the other words in it, but I remember the hook of that Edgar Allan Poe poem.
That's true.
Yeah. Being clear and concise. For me, it's better for me to write out everything that I plan on saying. So I have roughly 5 pages that if I read those 5 pages, I understand my transition from thought to thought, and it's all there. I may not use it, but I have to write it all out that way. And those are, I feel the most prepared when I'm that way. Because if I bullet point, which is another way you can do it, sometimes I don't have the as good of a transitional statement going from one idea to the other idea, or one ayat to the next ayat, trying to bring it home if I don't write it out. But if I write it out and I read it again, I'm like, hold up, I'm missing something. Why I jumped from this to this without any kind of linking statement. And so I know to add it. So writing it all out helps me to be clear and concise. That way I know, hey, you need to change the order of this, or I said this earlier, I don't need to say it here. Writing it all out helps me to better formulate so that I can be clear and concise. And then after you write it all out, reading it over it, making sure that, before the khutbah, you've read over it, the order, the flow, and it makes sense to you. I think we can filter out best and come up with our best presentation when we review it for ourselves. And then post it, for further improvement. You might want to watch your video or watch the recording of it, or so that you can critique yourself. All right. I think I started off with this. I think getting personal, having personal stories are very impactful. I'm very careful with the way I use personal stories and personal narratives, but we get examples of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, being asked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reveal his innermost thoughts. We have Surah Duha and Surah Inshirah are examples of that. Didn't I find you an orphan? Didn't I find you wandering? And he's having to reveal things that were really between him and Allah. In the way that he was done. Allah has asked him to reveal that, as it made it a part of a surah that we all now have to repeat. So it is perfectly okay, in my opinion, if Prophet Muhammad was asked to share and be vulnerable about his own inner thoughts, for us to do so as well, but do so in a way that is educational, do so in a way that resonates with people, but also do so in a way that doesn't call out any individuals. I try to be very firm. If I'm talking about myself, I'm the only person I'm outing. I try not to out any other person in my story and those real life stories. I try very hard not to use names unless they've already passed on, or unless it's that information is a part of the public domain. And that's just the way I do it. Imam Wazir, during our leadership training, he warned us specifically about calling out individuals, especially people in the community, by name, knowing that, only person who is identified by name is going to hell in the Quran is Abu Lahab. Otherwise, we talk about all of these other people, but, there are very few people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions by name as having the worst punishment. And there are companions who aren't mentioned by name, they're just mentioned by the actions of the fact that that they were there from the tafsir, like Abu Bakr in the story of the cave, where he's being they're being held up and the spider comes on. We know that there is somebody else with them, and only the tafsir lets us know who it is, but. But the point is not the person being there. Their name is not so much important. It's the action or the activity. So I think, and you can still understand that hey, I was with my homie who was, we were both scared together, but and then something happened. And so you're including that person in the story. You said that they were there, but you don't have to reveal their name because it's not as important as what was happening in the story. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Beware of your body language. So I think this is a really good point. If you're working on your public speaking skills, but never make eye contact, your audience might not connect with you. I know when they talk to us about public speaking, and people who have fear of public speaking, they say, oh, you should picture everybody naked, or you focus on something in the very back of the room or the horizon. Those are all good tips to get you over a hump. But if you really want to connect with your audience, you do have to scan the room. You have to not necessarily focus on faces, but at least let people see that you're looking in their direction, because it makes it that more meaningful. And occasionally, you will get those individuals that kind of give you energy. They give you life. You can see they're nodding their heads. They're paying attention. It seems like something is resonating with them. And then you can continue on, but you have to make those connections. You have to make that eye contact. And you see here, I am being very, I don't know if you can see or not, I'm speaking with my hands. I try not to speak with my hands when I'm giving a khutbah. I try to, grip the rostrum, keep my hands down, because it can be distracting. But it also be impactful when I've had khutbahs where, there's a point where I'm talking about, you got to hit it, and you make a loud noise with your hand when you use your body language effectively, because they say, and I forget the percentage, but so much of the way we communicate is not on what we say, it's the way we say it. Tone, our body language, all of these things speak and communicate more than the actual words that we're saying. So it is very important for us to kind of tap into that, because we want to communicate effectively. We got to communicate with all of our senses. We got to communicate with all of us and be careful that we're not communicating the wrong thing. Being slumped over, being unenergetic. If we appear sleepy from the rostrum, that's an easy way for somebody else to go to sleep, right? The body language it communicates. So when one person yawns, somebody watching them has a yawning effect too. It's a natural body response. It's a natural thing that happens that we communicate subconsciously without even knowing it. So be aware of your body language. And all right, last two. Practice often. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. You can always learn from your failures, but practice and practice often. I think that says it all. It's about fighting through and figuring out what works. I totally agree with that as well. I tell my kids all the time, you practice the way you play, right? So if you're lazy and moving at 75% in practice, you're going to be moving at 75% when the game is on the line to count. So you got to practice when you play. And then finally is the ask for feedback. This is a tip that really means that makes you vulnerable. And so for me personally, I have one or two people that I ask for feedback who I trust, who I don't feel like, who I know have my best interests at heart. And I ask them for their honest opinions on what I did, what I can improve on, what I need to do. Because I don't want feedback from everybody. I just, for me, I don't know if I can handle that. But I can ask a trusted confidant, somebody I trust, that, hey, did this work? Did you get anything out of this? And as long as you got something out of it, even if you didn't get everything, you got something out of it, I take that as a win. So I think that kind of wraps that up. So here's let's see if I can put it all on the screen at the same time. There we go. So how to be a better storyteller. The hook is think about the goal of your story. Incorporate personal details. Know your audience. Be clear and concise. Be aware of your body language. And practice and ask for feedback. So these are the 6 principles to being a better storyteller. The 6 principles to giving a good story that resonates and responds with everyone. So I don't know if we have opened up for questions and see if there's anything else we want to cover in this session.
Yeah, Imam, Jazakallah khair. I like how you spoke about engaging the audience with everything you've got, using your expressions, using tone of voice and modulation, things like that. Because something that stood out to me when I was listening to your khutbah, it was very easy for me to pay attention. You made it very easy for everyone to kind of stay engaged. Whereas other khutbahs, I'm kind of fighting myself to make sure I'm listening, And I think the way you did that is, first off, your expression showed that this was something that, you thought was very important. And it wasn't just like a blank expression. You had like a expression on your face that showed that, oh, this is, we got to hear, Then your speech as well, like the way you were speaking, the way your voice, I guess, the way you're expressing everything, it was very engaging for sure. And then you never like paused to, you always had something to share, mashallah. So it was like stories, and it was the short khutbah about Surah Al-Asr, if you remember that. So, mashallah, that's what stood out to me, your expressions and the way you modulated your voice. So I think that was a key part, that you have to make it easier for your audience to engage and listen. and keep their attention up.
One of the premiere movies of my youth was Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and they have in that movie they have the example of a teacher who's very monotone. Mueller, Mueller, Mueller. It just, something just drowns you to sleep. And those are not, speakers who speak that in that form is very hard to listen to. But I am often called, I have been called in my past the soft-spoken imam because of my nervousness. I didn't modulate my voice much. I didn't get loud. I was more. I wasn't as animated as I can be, and so it was after getting feedback like, hey, I was almost known as the soft-spoken imam for a long time, and my voice is not quiet by any means. In my normal life, I was like, okay, I have to do something different. And so that was a part of that. The feedback I received was what helped me to give the khutbah that you were able to witness a couple of weeks ago.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I tend to, I don't know if I'm soft-spoken, but when I'm speaking, I tend especially like in a public speaking way, I can tend to like my voice. I've been given feedback like my voice is trailing, like it becomes harder to hear me. Like I don't project. I guess that's the word. And so, how do you like how do you measure that or check that? Because I mean I can hear me, right, but I don't know if others like I said, I could start off at a volume that seems to be people can hear me, and then as I get, especially when I get like comfortable in it, like my voice is just kind of that volume drops.
Mm-hmm.
And so just wondering, how do you check in, or what cues do you read from your audience to kind of check in to see if you are delivering at a volume or even in a tone that engages your audience.
Okay. So when I was called the soft-spoken imam, I asked the particular audience member to kind of that I trusted, hey, tell me if I need, do a hand sign or something, if I need to speak up, or, let me know. So that's one method. Another method that I think some imams use is projecting loud enough that you hear that echo. There are certain imams who are always loud. Their volume is loud, regardless of what microphone they have. They are listening. I believe what they're purposely doing is speaking at a tone so they can hear themselves over the speaker. And if they can't hear themselves over the speaker, even if it's actually coming out of the speaker and it's a fine volume for the people under the speaker, if they can't hear themselves, they get louder until they can hear that, that reverberation, that feedback. I used to think, and sometimes I still think, it's just not good mic etiquette, but it is one of those ways to ensure that you are projecting and that you're loud enough for people to hear you. The last thing I would say is just looking at the cues in the audience. Typically, you don't focus on anybody, and it's hard to, at least for me, I don't focus on any one person. I'm just scanning the room. You may occasionally, but if you're scanning the room and you're giving people eye contact, you may occasionally get somebody who is willing to say, hey, I can't hear you. They might point to their ear. It's not rare. I would say it's rare. If you hadn't asked somebody to do this, it's not often that people feel courageous enough to interrupt you, they feel like they're interrupting. So, but seeing the eyes glaze over, seeing a lot of people start to look away as if they're not paying attention, those are cues that you are not holding people's attention. I know that some people purposely don't look at the imam, but uh, I will say that typically people look at the speaker. So when you see the majority of people not looking at the speaker, that is a sign that you're not holding your attention. I won't say that's true for every individual in the room, but if you have more people who are looking down than who are looking up, that is a sign that you're missing something. And I think the last thing I would say is, listening to watching a video of yours. Record what you said once, uh, so you can then equate uh, what you were feeling when your speaking or your tone went low, so okay, I have that feeling now, whatever that feeling is, whether it be you being comfortable or you being uncomfortable, or you were looking for you were thinking about what you needed to say next, and so your volume dropped. If you watch the video or the recording of it, you typically know kind of what you were feeling, and then you can associate that feeling with having to increase your volume. That answer your question?
It does. I guess I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
So say you start to say you become familiar with cues that either you're not uh, your audience has you're losing your audience, so to speak, or that I guess it's more like when you're losing your audience, like if you see those cues
Mm-hmm.
in real time, like what do you do? Like how do you shift to re-engage with your audience? So like, for example, if I have a volume issue, I can try to project, right? Like that's something I could do. But if you are in a space where you see eyes glossing over or some other cue to let you know that maybe I'm not engaging with my audience, um, how do you correct that in real time?
Um, Clap your hands, make a point, hit the rostrum, um, drive your point home. You can hit the rostrum and just being 1, 2, 3. It doesn't, we have to make, salat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. It doesn't necessarily have to be for impact, but it can be for volume. It does communicate energy and excitement. You're now changing your presentation style, where your body is communicating active action and energy. Even if all you're saying is you have to pray 5 times a day, it does. It's another way of re-engaging people. They're not expecting it. If you haven't been doing that the whole khutbah, now he's giving you all this energy and life. When you see um, performing artists, if you watch a concert, the artists and the dancers are everybody else, but what I think one of the most common tools is the whoever has the microphone will start to approach the audience. We can't leave the rostrum typically, but getting closer to the audience, getting getting more amongst the audience is one of the tools that people use. Is getting closer, or when they point to the drummer and they pop 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 pop. It's a change in the energy and dynamic, and you want to point to that uh, uh, linguistic change or a change in the tone or the tempo to wake people up. Audience participation is something that is kind of important, and we see it in the way that the source will reveal. If we've studied poetry, and we know that during Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, time, that poetry was basically the way that people talked and tried to impress each other, and they talked bad about each other. You would hire a poet, a slam poet, basically, to talk about somebody you didn't like, and they just rip them down. So you had poetry as this refrain, and knowing that poetry is this refrain, look at the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created certain surahs. Certain surahs start with Alif Lam Mim, right? As far as we know, whatever the actual message is, it's not communicating words, but those sounds were loud enough, were impactful enough. It kind of changed up what other people were saying, and it was a way of breaking through the noise and getting people's attention. So you can do those same kind of things, changing up your patterns, changing up what it is that you say, or like I said, or slamming, making up some kind of sound to get the people's attention. We see this even in the surahs that we have today as a way of kind of changing things up and making things. I've said this a couple of times, so I'll stop. Does that answer your question?
Yes, okay.
Yeah. All right, so we have roughly 60 minutes of recorded time. We can stop this session now. I think I have a couple of other things that we can talk about. We can save that for next week, though. Unless anybody else has any other questions or comments.
Jazakallah khair, Ustaz.
Wayakum. So we'll close out with dua, and inshallah, we will meet again next week. And hopefully, I will, at the conclusion of this, just ask for some feedback and changes. So please don't drop off. Hang with me for a second, and as we conclude. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Our Lord, give us the good in this life and the good in the next life, and save us from the punishment of the hellfire. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. Oh Allah, please give us mates and offspring who are the comfort of our eyes and help us to be imams, leaders of the righteous. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.